What's up, everyone, and welcome back to ClearTalk. In this video, we're going to, I'm going to try to go over what happened with the Supreme Court decision on Louisiana's district maps and the ruling around race districting, race gerrymandering, racial gerrymandering, and what all this means. Again, I'm going to try my best from a completely unlegal mind. All right, my best understanding of what happened here, what has led up to this, of course, what could potentially this cause for the future. We're going to talk about all that. So bear with me, and this, let's just try to have a good conversation about all of this. So, thank you very much for joining me here. If you are new to the channel, welcome. If you would like to check out more videos from the channel, please do so. Consider subscribing, like, share, comment, all that good stuff to get more videos in front of more people. If you would like to check out other videos of mine, or other channels of mine, rather, JMDPLAY, puzzling there. If you like what you see there, consider subscribing to those as well and do all the stuff over there as well. All of that is free for you, helps out the channels tremendously. If you want to go further than that, though, there's Patreon there, up there. $2, okay? You can support any of the channels that you would like to help grow those channels, to help grow Patreon, to help grow the JMD Nation, and contribute to that growth how you would like to. Any contribution and support you give is very much appreciated, and I thank you very much. That would help keep all these channels going, and be able to continue to doing content like this. So thank you very much for joining me. If you're returning, you're freaking amazing. You're amazing, and I'll do my best to tell you every time. And keep coming back, because you're what makes JMD Nation. All right, so the Supreme Court decision. All right, first off, I want to again disclaim that I am not of legal mind. I'm not a lawyer. I did not go to law school. I am looking at this from my understanding of what has previously happened. I actually read through a good portion of the actual court ruling through Alito's like explanation or whatever you call it, and then even Kagan and Jackson's dissent. I read through a good bit of that as well. Okay, I mean, I'm talking like upwards of 40 pages or so of the 90 or so pages that is this ruling document. I read through a lot of it, and then of course I watched a couple legal people that I pretty much trust for the most part, to try to get the best grappling and understanding of what has all happened here. Okay, all right. So, as we know, we've had multiple states with this whole election coming up. We've had Trump in the administration pressing upon the idea of like fair elections, or the trying to make sure that elections aren't rigged. And also there's this concern for the Republican Party around really the fact that they've been doing all that they've been doing. The administration has been, and they're afraid of losing their power right now, holding in the House and Senate, having full Republican power, that they're in some way or fashion in November going to lose one or the other, if not potentially even both. And so there has been this coalescing of Republican states that have tried to mid-cycle, okay, redistrict their states, swap districts around, redraw lines and all that, to try and keep a stronghold as much as possible, or make their stronghold even stronger in those states, presumably, by creating or eliminating or adjusting lines so that they can make sure either they gain seats or at least maintain seats in the House and Senate. this has happened. We've already had discussed this before, where it started in Texas, and I think it did some in Florida or a couple other states, where they were just changing. And this process it's already done, even on actual cycle times. And the cycle, according to the Constitution, your cycle is every 10 years. Okay, that's the expectation from the Constitution, is every 10 years you do a census and adjust your districts accordingly based on your population, and fluctuations of people moving in and out of the state or wherever, or even within the state. And according and with the district lining, you have to make sure also, for your one person one vote kind of concept there. So every district is supposed to be relatively very close in population. Okay, I don't know what the percentage is, but they allow, I'm sure, I guess, for a certain percentage of fluctuation between districts as far as population goes. But I'm sure there are some states that press that to the extreme, if not over that to some degree. But the idea is that every district is as close in population to each other as possible, so that no more. The idea that not anyone's vote means more than another, right? That's the idea. That it doesn't matter whether you live in this district or this district. The overall, whenever it comes to like percentage vote for any particular candidate, you are not being undermined because you live in this particular district. Your vote, not counting. And that's just on, like, as a population concern. But then there's the breakdown also when you talk about gerrymandering on racial and partisan lines. That's basically, and governments decidedly carving out lines and districts that give advantages or disadvantages to a particular partisan or racial, in a partisan or racial way. So what has happened with these other states? They've done this. Texas started it, a couple others followed suit, and then the backlash on that, because when all this, there has been multiple times that Congress themselves, Democrats specifically, have tried to put forth bills, legislature, that would make gerrymandering, ban it, basically. Make it harder to do, or make it basically just completely, outlaw it, from even being a thing, or at least hindering it, making it harder to gerrymander, or whatever the case. And Republicans have straight up denied that. They will not. They voted it down every time. It's been like 8 times now, I think, at least, that Democrats have put forth anti-gerrymandering laws or proposals, and the Republicans have shot it down every time, because Republicans love gerrymandering, and they've been doing it. Now, this is not to state that it isn't done on the left and by Democrats, because it has. But red states, Republicans are more known for doing it, especially on racial divide, than even partisan divide. But what you had here was, because of that breakdown, and it continues every time they implement it, it becomes even more and more of an issue and an argument. Okay, if you are constantly going to completely, like, not, go against actually banning gerrymandering, and you won't accept, any kind of rule or law or movement in the direction of trying to ban it, since you argue that it's a bad thing, but yet you're doing it, then Democratic states are going to do it also. And that started with California, of course. They had the big vote back in last November, where they basically asked It's the difference. They asked through a ballot initiative, asked their state, do you want us to redistrict mid cycle? Because the previous cycle was in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, and it wouldn't happen again till 2030. So, see, we are in mid cycle. And you have Republican states doing this outside of that cycle period. All right. California started it. That went through, and the actual people approved. Yes, we would like our districts redrawn because you've had all these Republican states, and we know California is mostly Democratic. They were like, we're not going to allow this. This is not fair. If they're going to do it, then we're going to do it too, just to make it fair, at least for this cycle, and add some seats. And we had the same thing a couple of weeks ago happen, if I'm not mistaken, in Virginia, where they did the same thing. They did a vote for their citizens, and they approved. Yes, we want to redistrict, and that added a couple of seats for Democrats, potentially. And this has all been being litigated out. There's arguments against it, arguments for it. I've said it again. I don't think that gerrymandering at all should be like it should be illegal. There should be, whether it's partisan or racial, anyway, either way, there should be some way that's developed for an actual equal opportunity for everybody, and districts broken up, or no districts at all, one or the other, in a way that everybody's vote counts, and it doesn't matter. Okay, a state can't enforce or press upon a district or draw lines in a way that favors any direction. Okay, now you have had states that have put forth litigation and stuff, bills that either to some degree ban gerrymandering in some ways, or they have put forth to where independent commissions actually do the line drawing and do the district designations. Although these commissions, of course, they are basically voted on through ballot initiatives also, or through whatever, just regular voting, for people to be put on those commissions. Okay, so so basically it's sort of a more democratic way where you have actual people voting people to this committee, and this committee is then supposed to be bipartisan, in an independent of the government, to draw these lines. Now, previously, this has been done, damn near manually, but with modern technology, there are algorithms and being done by computer, even AI. I'm sure at this point is sophisticated enough to help and assist in this. But also, there again, even when it comes to talking about AI and computers and stuff, it depends upon who is putting in the input, right? Who the question is being asked, the parameters that are being placed in how these lines, even how the computer or the AI draws the lines. So there is even a degree there that even in the hands of your government officials, that can be manipulated. All right. Now, the idea through the independent commissions is that they would be, again, bipartisan, and they're not driven by politics to draw the lines. It's more based on actual data. At least that's the idea. Now, these committees even range widely on who's on them and stuff. I'm sure to some degree, even in that case, just like every case, some way or another, there's partisan pressure. Sorry, I hit my mic. There's partisan pressure to influence that in some kind of way, I'm sure. But that's the whole battle all around when it comes to elections, and when it comes to anyone being represented in any particular area across the country, any particular state, whether or not your voice is counted, or you feeling like your voice is counted anyways. And it's a hard thing to manage because it's a difficult thing with so many different, people, different races, different opinions, different ideas. And then now there's been a more broken up, even now has been a more broken up idea, even on a racial bounds, that, whether or not you are partisan one direction or the other. And so it's becoming more and more complicated to try to designate this. But what has happened in Louisiana is that we had before 2022, there was the Louisiana split up of 6 districts, and they had one particular district that was consolidated to all black, okay, or majority black. And then the other 5 were majority white. And the issue there was that Louisiana is a third of the population is black, okay? And with that 1-to-5 ratio, you have split the state into the point that even though there's a third of the population that's black, only a sixth of that, that population only has a sixth of the actual overall vote. All right. So you've basically cut the black population, their power, their voting power, in half. All right. So there was an argument that there needed to be harder representation, stronger representation. And so in the 2022 cycle, they put forth, and it was, because they were saying that the Louisiana government was basically, even then, was racially gerrymandering. Because the idea behind that, and when it comes to racial gerrymandering, is that you have basically 2 ways. You either are cracking the vote, or you're grouping the vote. Cracking is where you take a population, if you want to make their vote not matter, you make a minority population and you split them up. So you split all of them into, split them all up so that each district, they are lesser representation, and therefore their voting power doesn't matter. It is lessened, it is suppressed, because the majority voting goes against them. And then there's, so this all gets split up. And then you have the consolidation type, or the, I think it's cramming act, where you actually take the whole population, instead of splitting them up, you place them all together into one single or very few locations, so that they do have consolidated representation, but in relative to the other districts, it is minimal. So they have very minimal impact on your state overall. And even when it comes federally, within the House, it has less representation. So that's the 2 ways of gerrymandering racially. And then, of course, partisan gerrymandering is trying to gerrymander districts into where there's a stronger hold, either Republican or Democrat, depending upon what the government prefers or what the government would try to push. Again, I don't agree with either one of these. All right. I think everybody should have equal representation, but that is a very hard thing to do. Admittedly, it kind of is. But, and this all falls from, okay, anyway, before I get there. So, what happened in 2022 was that they brought a new map for that election cycle that added in a second primarily black district, okay? basically ranging from, because the first one, let me bring up it. This is the censusreport.org is basically showing you here. This is the current state, but previously this district down here, okay, was the one, or something relatively close to that, was the all black community single district, and and the rest of the state was all majority white. Then when they brought in, they added in this district. Okay, so you have these two districts now. This district that's running up through the middle of the state, all the way from Baton Rouge to Shreveport, to, again, give, the idea there was to give more representation for the black community, but for the Republican government, for their perspective, this gave more representation for the black community, but it did not hinder the House representation when it come to, like, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and one or two others that are represented by the state that are Republican. It didn't affect them in a way that would possibly have them lose their seats, okay, in the vote. So it was kind of a win-win for them in presenting this. Well, what happened was you had some people, some white people, matter of fact. So the argument usually when it comes to racial gerrymandering is that is usually it happens in a way that suppresses the minority vote. All right, that's usually what's argued. In this particular case, though, it was actually being argued that this was suppressing the majority vote, or at least the people that felt like they should have the majority vote. It was white people. So they were making an argument that, oh, this suppressed my vote because I happen to fall within this district, and now my white vote doesn't matter anymore or as much. Although I'm going to show you why I even feel that was a bit of a push, a bit of a stretch. But and so therefore they were calling this racial gerrymandering, and it was pushed all the way up through the courts. Now the local, state, federal courts pushed back on this and said that really wasn't the case, or at least to some degree that they didn't prove to them, they didn't have proof to make the court basically force the state to redraw, and it kind of just got dropped into this limbo state. No pun intended. Until now, reaching the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court finally was like, okay, look, this is what's going on. And the Supreme Court said, you can't do this. Like, they were stating that not only, like, that racial gerrymandering is illegal by the Constitution. And so, therefore, they are actually changing the way, the parameters in which you can even make an argument for racial gerrymandering, and actually lifting the bar to where not only do you have to prove that, before it's pretty much litigated or argued that if any districting that suppressed a particular minority vote resulted in their vote being suppressed, it was kind of an after look, then it was wrong. But in this case, it was, my understanding, it's more bringing back to, they're not even worrying about the after effect or the effect through what the voting would cause. But, like, you have to approve now kind of almost a pre-clearance there. You have to approve or prove that the gerrymandering or the racial, like a minority group is actually being suppressed by the decision. You have to prove that the government body who drew the lines intended the lines and districts to be drawn in a way that actually was racial and not partisan, which is another scope that cannot even be proven. So any government now can actually racially divide, racially discriminate, racially draw lines, and then just say that it was partisanly done, because historically black communities have voted one way, white communities have voted another way, although those lines are blurring very much so these days. But they could just easily argue it as a partisan thing, because also the Supreme Court, while they have no problem ruling on racial gerrymandering, they push back and try to throw out partisan gerrymandering. They don't want to rule on that. This was the last attempted, I think, in 2019. They had a ruling where basically they were saying, we have no statute here. When it comes to partisan gerrymandering, that has to be done by the state or has to be dictated by Congress. We can't fall in that. We have no prior law justification or anything in the Constitution that bars in any way or stipulates in any way around partisan. Only when it comes to racial divide do we have this precedent. We don't have this as far as the Constitution goes, or anything that has been, amended or extension of the Constitution around partisanship. That hasn't been litigated. And they feel like they argued that they didn't have any precedent, so they didn't need to argue it. And that they did not have the power to argue it. So they just basically dismissed it. So partisan gerrymandering is basically legal. Governments can decide to district in a way that keeps a stronghold for them. Local representation and federal representation. And it's okay. There's nothing pushing back on that. And with this decision last week, now, even when it comes to racial gerrymandering, the bars are now set so high, and the levels that you have to even argue that a government has racially gerrymandered, has racially discriminated against you, has made so hard that it's almost impossible to reach. And it doesn't even matter about how a district can result, what it results in. It's that you have to even prove from the get-go that that was the intent. And then you have to also even prove that the community, for that minority community to have a majority representation, I'm trying to make sure I get this right, that they block vote in a way where they all vote majority collectively in one way or the other. And actually, my understanding is that they have to even vote in a way that favors the government intent, like partisan intent. So if a government says we want most of our districts to be like a Republican government wants to say we want most of our districts to be Republican because we can partisan gerrymander and that's not a problem. You have to have representation For you, in order to have representation, you have to, that voting block for the minority community has to agree that they will vote block for that government's partisan intents. So if they say that we have only Republican representation, the only people we're putting forth are Republican, you can have representation in a district, but you must also vote for that, for whatever we give you. You can't get representation if you are wanting to vote in the opposite or in a different way from what our local state government is intending for our state. It's absolutely bonkers to think that way. But that's what this basically has opened up. Quick history. This is all basically breaking and shutting down or eroding, at the very least, the Voting Rights Act. Now, prior to 1965, you had the 15th Amendment, which was put forth in 1870, which is your constitutional bounds around voter discrimination based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. This come after the Civil War, when the black population, slaves were freed and were given the right to vote and all that stuff. And even though the 15th Amendment prohibited discrimination, it didn't lay out all the different ways, like things that were restricted when it come to the way those votes would be cast out, because or would be carried out, or elections would be carried out, because that was done by the states. And so for almost an entire century, from 1870 to 1965, you had states, particularly the ones in the South, your Confederate states, because they were bound and determined to be racist as hell, did every kind of act possible to suppress the black vote, because they didn't want black people having representation. They didn't want them affecting or changing the laws or how anything was done within their states. So they would have practices like literacy tests, poll taxes, all-white primaries, intimidation tactics, all these different things to suppress the black vote and make it to where their vote did not matter within their state. And in order to rectify that, you had the Voting Rights Act in 1965, which is basically legislation to kind of amend the 15th Amendment, give provisions to it. And the main two were Section 2, which prohibits any voting practice or procedure that results in racial discrimination or diminishes the voting power of a minority group nationwide, or minority groups nationwide. So basically banning all those types of actions or procedures or practices, like the literacy test, poll taxes, all that kind of stuff, from that resulted in racial discrimination. All right. And then you had Section 5, which was a pre-clearance kind of thing, where you were required, jurisdictions were required to obtain federal approval if they have had a history of discrimination. They had to obtain federal approval before changing any voting laws or procedures or anything like that, so that it was ensured that they were not discriminating. Now, there have been court cases since, particularly in 2013, and I think even again in like 2019 or 21 or something, or 24. I don't know. Anyways, there have been a couple of cases since that have pretty much eliminated or nullified that pre-clearance Section 5, to where now states don't even, they're not even really required to prove. Okay, if they wanted to change district lines and stuff, then they had to like give pre-clearance, give like basically drafts to be approved before they could actually place it into law or push forward any kind of bill for it or whatever. Now they can pretty much just do it. So Section 5 has been almost nullified at this point. But even Section 2, there's been some litigation since, notably, and I think it's in 21, that they that even that, because and of course even the last week's, that has raised the bar even on proving racial practices or racial discrimination, to the point that it's almost hard to even prove that now. So that's what's happened. That's what's happened with this decision, is we basically now have caused a situation where now states, and let's be honest, it's going to be our southern, far, hard Republican conservative states, where previously some of those states have put into place, Florida being one, have put into place legislature before now that protected to some degree gerrymandering, especially on racial, it's kind of the election fairness or something like that in Florida, trying to make sure there was equal representation for black people, and and now there's going to be states that are going to start immediately redrawing. Florida, of course, being the first one. Now, immediately after this decision last week, you had Ron DeSantis come out with a new congressional map, changing the lines and cutting back on the more black representative. Damn, my words. The black representation districts, eliminating some of them. Florida passes DeSantis map after Supreme Court ruling, race ruling. Florida lawmakers have approved Governor Ron DeSantis' new congressional map within hours of U.S. Supreme Court ruling, narrowing the use of race in redistricting. The plan, which could boost Republican seats from 20 to 24, halves the number of Democratic-leaning districts and is expected to face immediate legal challenges under the state's Fair Districts Amendment. The move aligns with a broader national trend of mid-decade redistricting following the court's decision in Louisiana versus Calais. And this is, of course, this is where it's breaking it down. The Supreme Court 6-3 decision, which is what happened last week, struck down a race-based congressional district and raised the legal bar for using race in map drawing. Samuel Alito, who is the majority opinion, emphasized that race should rarely influence government decisions through the Voting Rights Act, can still justify such districting in some cases. This ruling emboldened DeSantis to argue that Florida's Fair District Amendment is unconstitutional, even though the court did not fully support that claim. So his strategy, DeSantis advanced a mid-decade redistricting plan that reduces Democratic-leaning seats from 8 to 4, citing population growth and a need for race-neutral districts. His legal team framed the Fair District Amendment as entirely invalid due to its racial fairness clause, a direct challenge to the state's gerrymandering ban. The legislature approved the map along party lines with minimal Republican dissent within hours of the Supreme Court ruling. So this is what's going to happen. You're going to have state after state after state. That's going to be like, okay, where now before, because of the Voters' Right Act, we had to make sure that minority communities had the equal opportunity representation, even though we still, marked those lines to where it didn't hurt us as far as like partisan representation as much as we could. Now we don't even have to do that. The Supreme Court has argued that you cannot use race, or you cannot in any way, that race cannot be used as a way of making sure that, somebody is represented properly, basically cutting down the Voters' Right Act. So now you're going to have state after state after state redistrict in a way where now it's going to be solely partisan. And they're going to cut the minority votes down to nothing, where they won't matter whatsoever. And that's happening right now in Florida. But then, if it wasn't enough, that immediately happened after this. Also, immediately after this ruling, in the state that was under this ruling, in Louisiana, Governor Jeff Landry suspends only U.S. House primary elections following the Supreme Court ruling. He unilaterally, on his decision, officially from the state of Louisiana, suspends not elections that are, going to happen in the future, but ongoing election initiatives and ballots or whatever, ongoing procedures. The best way to end race-based discrimination is to stop making decisions based on race. Here in Louisiana, we're proud to lead the nation on this charge, allowing elections to proceed under an unconstitutional map undermine the integrity of our system and violate the rights of our voters. This executive order ensures we uphold the rule of law while giving the legislature the time it needs to pass a fair and lawful congressional map. I would like to thank blah, 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 blah for this part. The ruling issued on April 29th found Louisiana's current congressional district map enacted under the SB 8 during the 24 first extraordinary session to be unconstitutional gerrymander. The decision effectively reinstates a lower court injunction prohibiting the state from conducting congressional elections under the invalid map. As a result, the state's closed party primary elections for the U.S. House, previously scheduled for May 16th, and the secondary primaries set for June 27th, are suspended. Early voting for the May election was set to begin May 2nd. Okay. So you had like ballots and stuff go out to people, early ballots, early voting or whatever. That started on May the 2nd. It was sent out, or they were getting ready to send out to people to vote, like military personnel overseas and all that stuff. As a matter of fact, I think they were already sent out. And he's suspending this. And here it continues on. Other offices and ballot measures scheduled for May 16th will continue as planned. This suspension will only apply to the U.S. House race. So understand, in this argument of unconstitutional maps and, trying to make sure that our voters are not having their rights violated, He's only concerning himself with the U.S. House race. Any other local offices or ballot measures or anything going on in the state, not a problem. We'll continue with that. But the U.S. House, we're canceling it. We're suspending it. It's exactly what Trump wanted. Trump said months ago that he wished that he could cancel the November elections. And they've been looking for every different possible direction that they could make that happen. Gerrymandering, for making sure that if they couldn't stop it, that they would at least hold control. But what it looks like to me is that Mr. Jeff here has made himself the guinea pig to be like, hey, boss, we'll let our state, we'll go through all the legal process and fights to see just how far we can go. See how far we can push this. Because there's no doubt that this decision, for one, is probably illegal and will be immediately pushed back on by lawsuits. And it will have to be litigated in court. And more than likely, it won't hold up. But just they want to push anyway, because if they were to get Supreme Court to allow this to happen, what they basically damn near cutting down the Voters' Rights Act last week. If they can keep pushing, and they will keep pushing, they will keep pushing, they will keep pushing to see just how far they can get the federal courts to allow this, allow that, allow this, allow that. Because if they could get this decision passed and him allowed legally in standing to do this, then states, multiple, you were going to see multiple Republican states start canceling elections, start suspending elections. And that's exactly what Trump wanted. They're laying it out. The Republican Party is telling you exactly what the bar is, how far they are actually wanting to go. And while I know the argument is always, well, there's no way, even when it comes to Trump and things he said, well, there's no way that's ever going to happen. There's too many things in place. The courts are not going to allow that. It's not it's just talk. It's not. Understand, it doesn't even matter that it will more than likely be litigated. And that's something that I've even argued multiple times with people when it comes to things Trump says or things that he enacts and does. It's them telling you when they are doing these things, when they are attempting these things. They're not just attempting it because they're bored or something. They're attempting it because that's where they want to go. That's their intent. That's the direction. That's how far they're going. That's what they're striving for. They're striving for supporting the vote as much as suppressing the vote as much as possible, making it to where minority communities are less represented. Like when they start cutting out polling locations and consolidating polling sites, making it harder for you to actually go vote because there's more people in a particular more people now trying to go to one particular spot, and it's lines up the, makes the lines forever long. Takes you hours for you to even vote, and it winds up just causing people to not vote because they don't want to wait in line that long. Things like that. All these different things they've done over the years. It's all to suppress vote. All so that, and they know that when the vote is suppressed, Republicans are more than likely to win. Because that's all. There's a history of that being the case. When fewer people vote, Republicans win. They don't care about your right to vote. They don't care about you having equal representation. They don't care about your concerns whatsoever. They will do what they can to suppress you, hold you down, make you invalid so that they can hold on to power and they can push all these ideals that, honestly, at this point, is a minority. The Republican Party is a minority. The Republicans, Donald Trump's victory was a minority. He acts like he had full on, what's the word? He uses it all the time. Anyways, like he had the majority vote, but he didn't. I discussed this way back when the election happened. That the majority vote was the ones who didn't vote at all. Kamala Harris only got around 31%. Trump got around 34%. And people who were eligible to vote but didn't vote was around 37%. It's becoming more and more incumbent that we need more and more people to get out to vote because they are doing everything that they can to basically rig this election. If they can't even go as far as to stopping it. Again, we have a governor right now trying to suspend the elections. We have states redrawing maps to suppress vote. We have a president that is trying to jump from one crisis to another, starting a war that he acted like was only going to be a few weeks. But now, don't pressure me. Don't pressure me. I got time. We got time. This isn't the Vietnam. This isn't Gulf War. This isn't Iraq. We got time. And even if they were to end what's going on in Iran, they already have plans to jump into Cuba and who knows what else. Because he is of the mind, this administration is of the mind and being influenced by Israel. And Netanyahu has done everything he can to keep himself in power, to not have to go through his legal cases, where he was more likely going to end up in prison by continuing wars and staying in conflict. And Trump has already previously stated, looks like all I got to do is start a war and I can stay in power. They're going to try every measure they can to maintain power. Whether we're talking about the White House or we're talking about Congress, they are doing everything possible to maintain power. And the Supreme Court just gave them a huge win in that progress. This is major. This is huge. And we can't let them get away with it. Now, again, a lot of this will be litigated. There will be lawsuits brought, and a lot of it will be pushed back on, and hopefully they will more than likely win on those cases and prevent these actions. But then we fall into the line of the space in which any decision being made could, quote unquote, alter the election. And whether or not any of them are going to argue, oh, well, now everybody's so confused and they don't have time to, like, work through all the legal avenues or the understanding of what's happening or the rules, and they're gonna be too confused to vote. So we've got to suspend elections anyways because people are not going to know what to do. They're going to try everything they can. Again, I'm not a legal expert, and I'm trying to explain this the best I can, best of my understanding. I probably messed up little things here and there. And if you want to correct me, that's fine. If you agree with me, let me know. If you have the same similar understanding, or if you think I am straight up wrong and lying about it all, let me know. Let's have a discussion. Thank you for joining me. And let me know what you think. Until next time, peace. ClearTalk. I'm out.